And
I
eventually that path led you to start college at 13?
I did. Yeah, so
How did you handle that huge leap into higher education while your peers were still in middle school?
I was weird. I was very, very bookish and nerdy, and on top of that, I was a theater kid, so I never really felt like I fit in my hometown.
Like, what, like 25 awards, I think?
Yeah, so it's won upwards of 25 awards. It's been screened at a few different theaters as part of those festivals. It actually premiered at the TCL Chinese Theaters in Hollywood, which is something that I'm really proud of.
Hello and welcome back to Ego is Here. Today I'm joined by Elinor Keyes, an award-winning filmmaker, actress, writer, and producer who started college at the incredible age of 13. Hello, Elinor.
Hi, it's so great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Of
When your
course.
story is so interesting, because the first thing that I wanted to ask you was, how were you as a child? I mean, what early influences shaped you as a person?
So I have always just been in love with entertainment as a pursuit. I actually grew up not having a lot of access to TV. I was a very PBS kids only kind of household. And
Uh-huh.
even having that little gateway into the world of television and film just inspired me so much. And I loved theater when I was a kid. I started theater at a very young age. I was always on stage. I started taking my very first acting classes back when I was in Chicago,
Mhm.
where I spent the first few years of my life. And the second that I found out what it was to perform, I was just hooked. As I started to develop and start to learn more about who I was and kind of what I wanted to go into, I started to really develop a fondness for animation specifically.
Uh-huh.
I don't came from the PBS Kids side of things with, Arthur and Word Girl and the very, very classic kids animation
Uh-huh.
stories. But I really just loved the idea of getting to create a whole world. It wasn't
Uh-huh.
even just people giving their performance, but it was people giving their performance and having it contribute to the the fully fleshing out of these characters that wouldn't have existed otherwise, that are just drawn and brought to life through technology. I just thought that was so cool. I also got really into comedy. One of the first comedic actors that I really fell in love with was Rowan Atkinson, or Mr. Bean. I have a love for very goofy, over the top physical comedy, and I think that comes very much from that side of things. My parents also got me into a lot of the old classics, Laurel and
Mhm.
Hardy, the Three Stooges, and
Yes.
it helped me develop my appreciation for all things goofy. um, that's something that has lived with me to this day. So
And eventually that path led you to start college at 13?
I did. Yeah, so
How did you handle that huge leap into higher education while your peers were still in middle school?
well, in a weird way, I feel like I was already kind of ready to take that next step. I know it sounds insane, and I think in a lot of ways, I wasn't actually ready to take that next step, but I grew up in a really small town. After I lived in Chicago, we ended up moving to Maine, and everybody there had kind of known each other for a really long time. I was kind of the new kid, and I was weird. I was very, very bookish and nerdy, and on top of that, I was a theater kid, so I never really felt like I fit in my hometown.
Mm-hmm.
And I had heard about the early college program at the school that I went to back when I was in Chicago. I was working with Northwestern as part of their gifted kid program, and the school that I was a part of had contacted them back when I was a little kid and said, "Hey, if you ever want to do this program when you turn 13, this is an option for you." So I'd always kind of kept it in the back of my head, and my parents had kept it in the back of theirs, and they had sort of brought up the idea to me when I was 12 and said, "Hey, I think this is maybe something that you should look into." So, you know, at the time, I felt like everything that I had been through and all of the work that I had been doing and the classes that I had taken and everything that I had been developing my sense of over the years in middle school had contributed to my desire and my ability to enter college at that age. I have always been a real go-getter and the kind of person who will take any opportunity that comes my way, for better or worse. And
It was for better, for sure.
it was definitely for the better. And I mean, in most ways, I, I think mm, there are a lot of different levels of preparation that you need to hit in order to reach a certain stage of your life.
Mm-hmm.
I was definitely prepared mentally. I was prepared academically and curiosity wise and interest wise. I had all of these things that I just wanted to learn and to explore that I wasn't getting to in middle school, and going to college gave me the ability to expand and to grow in those directions. And that was the part that I was really excited for, and the part that gave me that push to feel like I was ready to handle college at that age. But
Uh-huh.
at the same time, there's so much that you don't know. I was, you know, prepared in all of those ways, but then there's the emotional part and the social part.
Of
And
course. Of course.
right, and those were all things that you don't think about when you're in it. When you're that young, you're not really considering how much more development you need to go through in
Mm.
order to become a fully fledged person.
Yes.
And I just felt like, I have the academic goods, I have the experience, I know what I want to do, and this is the way to accomplish those goals. And you know once I got into it, there was definitely a little bit of a learning curve when it
Mm-hmm.
came to learning how to interact with other people and how to handle the stress and the emotions that come with being a college student. So that was definitely that was something that I ended up having to really adapt to on a
It was
very
hard for you to adapt.
it was definitely hard. And I think to a certain level, even as an adult having passed that point, I
Of
feel like there are
course.
still my knowledge when it comes to having that experience that really crystallizes you into the kind of person who's able to handle those things as a grown up. And for the record, I don't regret anything. I
Of
I am
course.
so for the experience that I had. I love being able to get started as early as I did, and to come into the business that I chose with so much insight and so much knowledge and so much creative inspiration that I
Mhm.
wouldn't have gotten any other way. But at the same time, I'm learning to be a little bit gentler with myself in
Mhm.
terms of the things that I just didn't have the chance to pick up yet. You know,
Yes.
I didn't have the classic high school experience of having to deal with other people's social hangups and
Mhm.
having to go through those 4 extra years of admittedly maybe not the most fun experiences. But I there are some things that the average person who what the normal
Yeah.
educational route
Exactly.
would have developed that I just didn't. And as someone who really likes to get a head start on things and do things first, I feel like I have had to sort of let my foot up off the gas in a lot of respects with
Mm.
that, and give myself the freedom and the kindness to just say, no, I was able to learn a lot at a very young age, but there are some things that I am only going to have the opportunity to learn now.
Of course, of course. So, how did your classmates and professors react to you being so much younger? Like, did the age gap make things harder, or did it push you to grow faster?
So, both in a certain sense. I was part of a program that did this. So I wasn't totally a floater on a college campus
Okay.
of 18 to 30-year-olds. The program that I was a part of was called the Program for the Exceptionally Gifted. It's at a school called Mary Baldwin College in Virginia. Very, very small, very liberal, artsy type of school. I really love it. And they have this program that allows kids age 12 to 17 attend college
Hmm.
sort of in high school. So I was a part of that program. There were about 20 students in my year in total, and I, was able to live with them and go through the process kind of alongside them. So at least I wasn't totally alone. There were people who were my own age on the campus and in my program, and this was also a thing that the what we called the traditional students, the 18 to 30-year-olds, were prepped for and that they knew was going to happen. So they weren't totally blindsided by my presence either. So I'm glad that we were on both sides of the situation. We were able to have that foresight. At
Hmm.
the same time, I definitely feel like, I mean, it was an odd situation, and finding my people, the group that you develop by virtue of being in college.
Mm.
I was at a little bit of a deficit going into that. And I was lucky enough to find just the most amazing group of friends when I was there. I immediately got very involved with the theater program at my school, and that just opened up so many doors for me socially because, even though I was different, I was a different age from everyone else in the theater program. I had this in of really loving this one very specific thing. So I felt like I was able to hold those kinds of conversations, and that became the start of a really amazing dynamic with a lot of people that I was able to develop these amazing relationships with, and I'm really grateful for that. At the same time, it's another thing you don't really consider when you are 13 on a college campus making friends with 18-year-olds. But after I passed the age of 18, I was looking back at that experience and thinking, there's no way that I would be friends with a 13-year-old now. So it was a very different, very unique circumstance.
Yeah.
And I'm looking back on it now, I'm forever grateful to the people who gave me a chance back when I was that age and allowed me to sort of participate in conversations with them. And because it led to my development as a person so much, getting to have those kinds of experiences and getting to talk about the things that I loved with people who loved them too, regardless of
Of the age
age
gap.
or of
Yeah.
circumstance. Yeah. And that was a really fundamental part of building my identity, was getting to have those kinds of conversations and to discover how much my passion for what I did played into my connections with other people. And that's something that I'm still using today. My closest friends, the people who I've really just had the most amazing, most fulfilling connections with, have been through the industry. And I think that has been such a fortunate thing that I am so grateful I was able to develop. And I don't think I would have gotten that if I hadn't already been at a little bit of a disadvantage making in college.
Yes. So, what made you start producing your own projects?
Yeah, I originally started out as an actor. I went when I was in college, I immediately joined the theater program. I majored in theater. I got my bachelor's degree in theater when I was 17.
Hmm.
And at the time I was all about the performing. I just wanted to be an actor. I didn't want to do anything else. And really dug my heels in terms of just deciding for a fact that I was going to be an actor for the rest of my life. That was all I was going to do. And the thing about being that young and having that much power over the direction that your life is going to take is that you really don't have a lot of information to go off of. When you only
Hmm.
have 13 years of experience living in the world and getting to know yourself, you really don't know who you're going to grow into. And that was something that I didn't realize when I was in college. If I had, I don't know if it would have changed things or not, but you know,
Do you think it
I
would?
I think I at the very least, I think if I had been older, I probably would have explored different options a little bit more. I don't think anything would have changed in terms of the direction that I
Hmm.
ended up going in, but there are some times when I look back and I'm like, "Oh man, I wish I had taken abnormal psychology or
Yeah.
you know,
Yes. Yes.
or calculus or and I got I got enough of it. I did all my gen eds. I took a pretty wide variety of classes, but it was all in service of this one thing that I had already decided I was going to do.
Hmm.
And looking back at it now, I do kind of wish that I had given myself that freedom to not define myself so early and just kind of explore some other stuff.
Yeah, but we're always
Because
free to explore, right?
oh yeah,
Change our mind,
absolutely.
no matter the age. Like
Oh
you
yeah,
can
and
change paths.
that's something that I'm doing right now. I have all of as an adult, I've developed all of these other interests. I really love science and building things,
Hmm.
and those are things that I'm coming to now. And I again, I don't think anything would have changed. I don't regret anything. I love where I ended up, but I do sometimes wonder if what things would have been like if I had given myself that ability to explore those things back when I had a very easy path to explore it
Yeah.
back in college. Now it's like, you have to kind of learn things for yourself, or you have to go back to school or take another class outside. And, I'm super busy now. And I just kind of wonder about what I could have done if I had given myself the chance. But,
Do you
that's
enjoy
all.
more like producing and writing than performing?
Yeah, so, that all goes to say I got my bachelor's degree in acting, and then I
Hmm.
went overseas to the UK. I got my master's degree actually in Shakespeare, so even more specific, but, very much on the performing side. And then I moved to LA. I was going to try to be an actor. I started going on auditions around LA. I was, taking classes and meeting people and really digging my heels in on the acting side of things. And I was just starting to realize as I turned 20 and then 21 that acting just wasn't fulfilling for me in the same way that it had been anymore, at least out on its own. So at the time, I was hoping to get into SAG AFTRA,
Hmm.
and I had a lot of friends who were hoping to get into SAG AFTRA as well because I was, really plugged into the acting scene.
Yes.
And I discovered a thing called the SAG-AFTRA New Media Project, which allows you to essentially kind of write yourself into the union by creating a series, getting that series approved to be a SAG-AFTRA project, and then filling out all of the paperwork and doing all of the stuff that will allow you to become eligible for SAG. Essentially, you create your own project, make it a SAG project, and then tell SAG, "Hey, I did a SAG project. Can you let me be in the union now?" And they're like, "Fine." So, um,
Easy
so
peasy.
right, yeah,
Not for
at least
everyone.
that's at least that's what I thought. So I thought it was a really amazing opportunity, and I thought, hey, I have all of these other people who are around me who also want to get into SAG with me. So what I'm going to do is create this series. And I wrote a whole script. It's 7 episodes. It's called Olympic Proportions.
I
It's a
saw it.
mockumentary
It was
style.
very nice.
Thank you. It's a mockumentary style sitcom about the Greek gods. Really, really goofy, really stupid. I, you know, created the whole thing and we filmed it on cell phones and um it was meant to be very goofy, and I hold that project with so much fondness in my heart. It was the start of such a great thing. But I went through all the steps with SAG and I got it approved through a lot of work and a lot of time and energy, and we filmed the whole thing. I edited it, I was in it, I directed it, wrote it, produced it. I did everything for it, and it was this insane huge undertaking that, looking back on it now, I'm like, there's no way I would do that that now that I have the option to not. But at the time it was like, I only have so many resources, this is my thing. So I kind of felt like I had to do it myself. And I'm so glad that I did, because through that process I realized that what I really love doing is producing,
For
is
this.
getting to have that sort of eye in the sky, big picture, creative problem solving sort of
Mhm.
approach to a project, rather than just coming in at the acting stage and doing the acting part, or just coming in at the writing stage and doing the writing part. I love all of those parts individually, and I love getting to do them on any project that I do them for. But what I really love is getting to sort of touch every piece of that puzzle, and getting to handle the logistics and the analytics. I'm definitely an organization nerd. I'm a spreadsheet. I, I love I love being able to sort data and keep track of logistics and um file paperwork and all of the stuff that
Wow,
that
all those things that I hate.
right. And and that's the thing that I realized is sort of unique. And this is something that I feel like I had to learn a little bit later in life, because if you no 13-year-old is producing a project, no one would let them, and they
Of
shouldn't,
course.
because you know
No
but
way.
right. And I think there's such a there are so many people who just want to be on the art side or just want to be on the analytics side, and I think that's great. And there have been times when I've thought to myself, it would have been so much easier if I could have just done one side or the other. But for better or worse, I live in both spaces at once. I love being able to work on these very, very creative, very artistic projects, and at the same time handle the more technical side of
Yes,
things.
yes.
um I just find that really satisfying. I always thought, I think if I hadn't gone into the entertainment industry, I would have wanted to become an engineer. I
Oh.
I really love being able to put pieces together and look at each part of the greater project individually and figure out where it goes,
Mhm.
and be able to zoom out and zoom in, and look at how all of these individual pieces mesh together and how they work to create a fully functioning project. And that's something that I never really felt like I got to do as an actor. That was a part of
Mhm.
my brain that wasn't being satisfied. And I love acting. I'll always love acting. But I generally am much happier getting to employ that sense of my brain that gets to move parts around
An
and
experiment and yeah.
up. Right.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I I've since expanded my scope. I've acted in projects since I've come to LA, but I've also written projects and I've produced a lot. I run my own production company now,
I know.
and I work in live action and animation, and I get hired for these freelance jobs where I get to go on a different project from month to month and figure things out in a different way. And I feel so much more at home and so much more fulfilled getting to
Uh-huh.
work on multiple parts of the puzzle rather than just focusing on any specific one.
Yes. And how's life in LA? How many years have you been in LA?
Life in LA is good. I moved here in 2020. Um, I was in graduate school when the pandemic hit.
Mm,
So, but I was overseas in England, living in this little tiny box of a student housing.
mhm.
Um, and it was not fun to get stuck there during quarantine. And,
Sure.
my original idea had been that I was going to stay in England after I graduated from my master's program.
Yeah.
And because of the pandemic, that ended up not being an option because, no one would sponsor my visa, nothing was open.
Yes.
So I had to come up with another plan. And, I this is one of those decisions that you can only make when you're 19, but I decided that, I really didn't have a place to go back to in the US and I had to go somewhere. So I just decided to set up a new home in Los Angeles where I had never been before.
Oh, wow.
uh, my master's program ended in September of 2020, so sort of at the at the end of the height of the pandemic, but things were definitely still very, very tenuous. So I flew from Heathrow to LAX and I just got an Uber to a hotel and stayed there for a week. My dad came down to meet me and he helped me go look at apartments until eventually we found one and I moved in that week and I've been living here ever since. And it's one of those things that could have gone so badly, and I'm so lucky that it did not go as badly as it could have. But I it's I never thought that I would be living in Hollywood. I Even being in the industry that I'm in, I always thought I'd be, a New York girl or, maybe go to Atlanta and go the more uh unique route. But I ended up here and it's not what I expected,
Mhm.
but
What
I'm
did you
so
expect? What did you expect when you went there?
honestly,
Did you have something in mind? Like,
I think I just it's not what I expected for my own life,
uh-huh.
if that makes I thought that I would be a much different person than I ended up becoming. And I think that sort of spills into my experience in Los Angeles in a way. I When I think back on what I wanted my adult life to look like back when I was 13, 14, it was the very cliched sort of, you know, I'll wait tables and I'll take temp jobs, but it'll all be worth it if I can just act. And
Yes.
now, the way that my life has gone is very different. And I think that's a really good thing. One of my favorite parts about living in LA is the people that I've met. I always kind of say LA is a theme park, but it's a theme park that's devoted exclusively to the thing that I love to do the most. So, everywhere you go, you can't buy a coffee in LA, you can't get it in Uber, you can't go to the grocery store without meeting somebody else who has something to contribute to this landscape of the entertainment industry. And viewing that as a producer, it's like like heaven. It's
Yes,
such a
amazing, of
cool
course.
experience to have. Right. And it brings me back to that experience that I had in college where once I found people whom I could talk to about the thing that I loved the most, everything sort of fell into place. And in a lot of ways, I feel like I've had that experience in LA too. It as I developed and as my life became what it has since become, a lot of things have changed, things have moved around, things have shifted in terms of my perception of myself and my surroundings. But it's really that ability to connect with other people who love the thing
The
that I
same
love.
thing?
That
Yeah, exactly. Mm.
right. And I think it's really it's really saved me in a lot of situations where I think being in this business and working the way that I do can feel very insular. You can start to feel like it's kind of you against the world in a sense.
Yes,
And
yes.
whenever I started to feel that way, the most amazing people I've ever met have come out of the woodwork and made me feel like I wasn't in it alone. And that is what I love so much about living in LA
Yes.
is
You
it's just
feel that you belong there. You feel
right.
connected with the people, yeah.
Yeah,
You have the same
exactly.
vision, you have the same interests.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's so inspiring just to be in this setting where you can walk out on the street and meet five people who have an interest in what you do.
You do.
I've never been to a Comic-Con, but I feel like, if I went there, it's a very similar kind of energy. It's this ability to feel secure in your own interests
Mhm, mhm.
that I never experienced living anywhere else. You know,
Yes.
I mean, there's a lot that I love about the place. There's a lot that I don't love about the place. But the thing that really makes LA special is that community, and
Mhm.
I consider myself really fortunate to be a part of it.
That's great. So, I also saw your short film that has been awarded, Getting Hit
Yeah,
On,
yeah.
and I wanted to ask you, what inspired you to write it? Like, how did you come up with the idea? And
So,
please about the
uh,
story.
so getting hit on I was in a theater group, and every year they do a one act play
Mhm.
festival. So I actually came up with the idea for getting hit on as my idea that I was going to write and submit for that one act play festival. And as the assignment was being explained, I took out a post-it note and I wrote down I think word for word what I wrote down was man takes another man on a date to kill him. Other man so awkward he can't do it. And I
No, it's not so simple.
I mean, yeah, right.
But
And
yeah, I understand.
it I for the life of me, I don't know where that
Came
inspiration
from.
came from, but once I had latched onto it, I sort of ran with it. And I'm the kind of writer who I I write mostly comedy, and when I write, I tend to write joke to joke. So, once I had that concept, I was able to come up with these lines that I would make myself laugh at, and um, and I strung those along into a cohesive story. And that's kind of how it got to where it is. I wish I had a better, more inspirational story about how that came to be, but um honestly, I got the idea for that concept, and I started coming up with ideas that could fit within that world. And as I developed it, it just became more and more ridiculous by virtue of who I am. And then I submitted for festivals, and it would get accepted. And it was a really weird feeling of like this bizarre story that I came up with on a whim is being recognized for being weird and
It
over
has
the
won,
top.
like, 25 awards, I think?
Yeah, so it's won it's won upwards of 25 awards. It's been screened at a few different theaters as part of those festivals. It actually premiered at the TCL Chinese Theaters in Hollywood, which is something that I'm really proud of. Just the Chinese theaters as a uh, place that I've been very familiar with, and that I'm really honored to have had my work been screened there. Um, and now it's available on YouTube. So if you want to go find Getting Hit On, the short film,
We'll link
um,
below. Yeah. So
right.
the recognition did take you by surprise in a way.
Um, I mean, I I guess it did and it didn't, and I feel like that's kind of how everything has gone in this.
Because, you know, it's
In
a huge thing, like 25 awards. It's like a big thing.
Right. I mean, no, that part definitely, you know, it. I did the thing about submitting for festivals is I didn't really know what to expect. I knew that there was a good chance it would get something or other, because I feel like that's kind of how it works.
Works,
And
yeah.
you know, I had friends who had their work be accepted to and screened at festivals that were similar, so I sort of knew going in sort of what the process was going to be like.
Mhm.
I didn't expect it to get kind of the windfall that it got, and I definitely didn't expect to be recognized on my end for doing the things that I did, because I like the script won a couple of awards, and like I think I won an award at something for producing, and those were very out of the blue. That was a very cool experience. I
So it
you know
changed the way people saw you in the industry?
to a certain extent, I think, it's interesting building my identity in this space, especially living in LA, which is the movie making theme park.
Mhm.
Um, everyone is kind of fighting for their slice of the pie.
Yes.
And I think, that's a good thing and a bad thing. I know that there's always going to be a lot of competition, but I think the way around it is just to give yourself the ability to trust that the people who your work is going to resonate with will find it.
Mhm.
And that was what the festival process really proved to me, is that there's a market for everything,
Mm.
because there are people who appreciate everything. And, you know, even my weird, bizarre, uh, hitman romantic comedy has
I love the
uh,
way you describe it, like it's
thank you. I've had to small tangent, being the way that I writing the kind of work that I do, I've had to get a lot of experience in succinctly describing what exactly I write about, because what I write about is so bizarre and off the wall. I'm working on my newest short film right now, which is an animated short film called Get Yeast to It, which is about a vision of the afterlife where humans are judged by sentient cells of yeast and sentenced to eternity based on whether or not they ever ate bread. It's a lot of that. um, Everything I make
amazing.
is very, so I've had to kind of refine the art of the elevator pitch. Um, but anyway, I love things that are weird and that are quirky and that are over the top and goofy and ridiculous, and you know
Yeah, but
oh,
humor, often hides
yeah,
truth.
the
Wh what
humor. And
what kinds of truths do you try to sneak into your comedies and animated works?
my favorite kind of story is one that is both stupid and smart. The perfect example that I always go to is The Simpsons because I think it does it so beautifully. It's this layer of absolute ridiculous, goofy humor with puns and fart jokes, and it's so stupid. But then if you dig a little deeper, there's this really interesting, really profound social commentary
Mm.
that just if you're not looking for it, and I think, you know, if you don't want to look for it, that's a totally fine
You only stay on the
tactic.
surface of the things. Yeah, you don't go deeper. Yeah.
Yeah, and you enjoy it for being
Mhm.
goof and dumb, but if you want to dig a little deeper and you want to glean more meaning out of the comedy and the story, you can do that as well. And that is something that I've always admired in the media that's really resonated with me is it's this ability to do both at once,
Mm.
to entertain and to teach, to give people the goofiness that's gonna make them happy and then also sneak in a little bit of meaning to, you know, maybe kind of change people's minds about things
Yes.
or
Yes.
enlighten them in some sense. And
Yes.
that's kind of what I aim to do in what I write and what I create is give people that initial hook of the stupid and then include little tidbits of the smart. And, you know,
Yeah.
for the record, it's really fun to write. I One of my favorite parts of the writing process is getting to craft these very silly jokes. And like I said, I that's kind of where I start. I begin by coming up with these dumb little comedic bits. And then once I have those down, I kind of look for the underlying meaning, the thing that's going to tie it all
Mhm.
together and going
Mhm.
to really make people think. And
Yes.
that I feel like is where you get the most profound stuff. I think comedy absolutely has the potential to have as much meaning and as much power as drama.
Of
And
course. Of course.
yeah, and I just love having that opportunity to go about it in such a quirky way to feel like my my could potentially have have meaning and could have an impact on somebody emotionally or spiritually or whatever.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we're gonna tell some puns and fart jokes because it's fun.
So
So
you've called yourself a loud, bossy nerd with
yeah.
crippling anxiety. And I wanted to ask you, how do you channel anxiety into creativity instead of
Oh man.
letting it hold you back?
Yeah. So this has been an ongoing process for a long time. You know, since before I was in college, I've always been a very anxious person just in general. And I've come a long way. I've made a lot of strides just in sort of channeling that nervous energy and figuring out how to reconfigure it into something that can be useful and not soul crushing.
Yes.
um the thing that I've had to keep in mind when dealing with any sort of emotional turmoil in this industry or just in general is anxiety, depression, all of these things that I can get bogged down with, they're not unique. And I think that is the trap I that people can fall into and that I've fallen into before is when you start to have these kinds of thoughts about, your own worth and your own insecurities and your own hangups. It's a vicious cycle because those thoughts want to trap you in that space of feeling like
Yes.
you need them and that they are a part of you and that you're the only person who feels this way and these are a part of your mindset that you can't get over and you can't overcome. And the thing that I eventually had to come to realize was that, you know, it's not special. It's not unique. It's not the thing that makes me me. And that's not to say that it doesn't deserve, you know, attention
Attention,
and
yes, yes.
right. But and you know, I don't think I would have gotten out of those moments without giving myself and my mental state that attention and care. But I feel like it's a very dangerous cycle when you start giving it the power to define you.
And how are you able to stop that cycle? What do you do
One
practically?
one thing that's really helped me is hearing stories from other people, the people that I've looked up to, and hearing them talk about their anxiety and their
Um,
depression and their insecurities. And it kind of planted this idea in my head of, oh, even the people that I look up to the most, even the people who I've modeled my career around, who I think of as so wildly successful, have
yes.
had these moments. They've had times when they felt weak and off kilter and out of place. It's
Um,
just part of being human. And once I was able to detach myself from that sense of, you know, this is a deficit that's always going to live with me, and started attaching it more to I'm a human and I'm going to have things that make life easy for me and I'm going to have things that make things hard for me. But at the end of the day, everybody else is in the same boat, just with different chips. Um, that helped so much
yes.
in in unhooking myself from that mental cycle of, of
Feeling alone and
right.
yeah.
And
Because that is the reason that I created this podcast. I really enjoy
yeah,
listening to other people's stories because you're
right.
able to learn so many things about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I really appreciate listening to it, because it's so important to know that you're not alone. And I think it sounds kind of banal to
Yeah, but
say.
it isn't. Like, it really isn't because,
Yeah,
we have to understand that we're all struggling with our own, demons, and
right.
we all have our bad moments.
Yeah.
Life is
And,
unpredictable. It has its ups
right.
and downs. So you just
Absolutely.
you have to
And
always
it
keep that
feels
in mind.
yeah, and it feels sometimes like nobody talks about it, like people want to highlight the best things about their career, and they should, because they're, you know, it's great to have that
Yeah.
inspiration and that motivation and show people the best things that you've done. But at the same time, I feel like it's so helpful hearing stories from time to time about times when people weren't doing as great, because
Yeah, but
it kind of
even
that
successful people, they have failed
right.
so many times, you
Hmm.
know, until
And I love
they were able to make it in the
right. And
industry or in whatever profession or in life
yeah.
in general.
Hmm. And that's something that I always have to keep reminding myself is, that person that I've looked up to since I was a kid, the person who I think of as the epitome of success, who I think is just so amazing. They felt like this, nothing, no, at this point, you know, we've been on this earth for so long. I'm convinced that no part of the human experience is fully unique. Everything that can be felt has been felt at some point or another. And, you know, I think that's really a beautiful thing. And I think it's something that's important to keep in mind.
Mhm.
It's there's there's no amount of bad that you can feel that
Hasn't
hasn't
been
been felt
felt before, yes.
by somebody who made it through already.
Mhm.
And, you know, in my worst moments and the times when I feel the most anxious or the most depressed or the most insecure in my own abilities, that really helps me to think about, you know, um, somebody else who had these exact feelings before made it to exactly where they were supposed to be.
Exactly,
And
exactly. Yeah.
that's been the most important thing for me to keep in mind.
So I don't know, what are you working on right now?
Yeah,
Anything
so I've got
to share with
things.
us?
Yeah, so I'm currently working with my indie production company to produce a few different projects. We just launched the crowdfunding page for a feature film that I'm working on called Adam and Evie. It's
Mhm.
a really sweet romantic drama. And I'm one of a team of three really amazing producers who are helping to bring it to life. So that's been really exciting. I'm also working on a psychological horror short film called Something Better, which is a proof of concept, which is very exciting because we're working on the short film version right now. And then as soon as that's done, we're gonna shop it around and try and get it made into a full feature film, which is
Mhm.
always a really cool
Same, yeah?
thing to keep in mind. Yeah. I am also working on a couple of other projects that are not quite in the sharing stage yet,
Okay.
but uh, I am very excited to share what I've been working on. So as soon as we get to that point, I will be shouting it from the rooftops.
Great.
And that's my freelance work, my production company, that the projects that I've been hired on. On a personal level, I am working on building my animated production company, which is really exciting. We're getting ready to launch a couple of projects. One really big one that I'm excited to be working on right now is called Stupid Cupid, You're a Real Mean Gal, which is
I know
uh
the title.
yeah, it's it's so much fun. It's about these two ex-girlfriends who work at this company of cupids that are assigned to go and you know do the whole cupid thing, shoot people with arrows to get them to fall in love with each other. But because they have broken up and they're on the rocks, these two get reassigned from the cupid matchmaking division to the divorce division, where they have to be responsible for people to break up. um, it's really cool. I'm collaborating with a really amazing visual development artist. It's his idea, and he was the one who created the characters, and he's been posting a lot about it on social media, and it's gotten kind of a following, which is really exciting. So we're in the middle of producing that right now. I'm, in the early stages of putting everything together, assembling a team, and getting people on board, which is really exciting. Bouncing off of that, I'm working on three animated series at the moment that are all in different stages of production. So the hope is that working with this short film, we'll be able to get that out, and then we'll be able to parlay the buzz that we get from that into working on these more long-term, larger projects in the future. So that's really exciting. Um, I'm also doing some writing. My own short film that I mentioned a little bit earlier is going to be coming out soon. We're currently in the animation stages of that, which is really cool. Um, you know, Getting to watch an idea that I had in my brain be developed not just through the creation stage and putting it on screen, but the drawing stage, where the artists who are working on the project are literally drawing up the characters that I came up with in my head, is insane. It's such an
Yeah, it's
amazing
amazing, yeah. I'm sure it's an
um
amazing feeling. So
yeah,
do you have any advice for people who dream of making their own projects but are scared to take that first step?
I will always say just do it. Just take that.
Whatever means you have, right?
Whatever means you have. I mean, like I mentioned with Olympic Proportions, that was my first project, the first thing that I ever produced. and I did it completely on my own. I had no resources. I think I made it on a budget of like $1,000. We were filming with cell phones and, in my apartment and in public parks, and like it was such a beautiful mess of a production, and I had no idea what I was doing. But that was, how I learned. I learned on the job. I learned
That's the
through.
best way to learn.
It really is.
Yes.
And, especially since, I didn't have that because my educational experience was very specific. I didn't have the ability to, learn all of those things, all of that stuff that I was going to need to do through like a production program at school. So I kind of put it together myself. And I'm not gonna lie, like it was hard, it was
Mhm.
scary, it took a lot of work, but you know, at the in the end, it gave way to not only that project becoming a reality, but a complete shift in my worldview and how I conceptualize my career and myself as a person, and send me on this totally new path that I didn't even know was going to be an option back when I first started. So, and since then I've had so many more experiences like that where I just jump in and kind of weather the storm and come out better for it in the end.
The
And
beauty
I'm
of
not.
exploring. I think, that's the beauty of being able to
Yeah,
explore and experiment, not
yeah,
only when you're
absolutely.
young, but,
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know whatever whatever stage of the process you're at, whatever knowledge you're going in with, whatever perspective you have, it all contributes to your to the story that you have to tell. And like I
Mhm.
said before, there's a market for everything. It's just figuring out how to connect with your people,
Yes.
and you only get that through doing it.
Yeah.
So I say, even if you're nervous, even if you don't know what you're doing, find people who will help you figure it out and make your thing.
Yes. So when people look back one day, what do you hope they'll say about Elinor Keyes as an artist and as a person?
I hope that they say, "Wow, she's weird," but um, she is so dedicated and so passionate, and she clearly loves what she does. And I, you know, the random hypothetical person in her fantasy, um, really connected with the story that she had to tell. Um, this hypothetical person is ideally, someone who loves bizarre comedy and is also, looking to find some sort of meaning in the everyday, um, and, you know, wants to see a cartoon about yeast. I don't know.
Why not?
Yeah, exactly. If this is my fantasy, I have to believe that those kinds of people are out there.
Of course, of
Um,
course. And
in
they are.
it, yeah. In any case, I hope that on a personal level, I hope people see me as someone who is driven and ambitious and passionate, but also just really curious and willing to learn, because I'm all
Yes,
of those things. And I hope
you are.
they've gotten me this far, and I hope they'll take me the rest of the way.
I'm sure they will. And you have such a lovely energy. So, Eleanor, thank you so much for being here.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. It's so amazing to talk to you, and I'm so excited to share my story with the Ego is Here listeners. So, to all of you out there, thanks for watching, thanks for listening.
Yeah, and to all of you, as you know, Ego was here, you were here, and that's enough.